Hello, hello. This is Sippy Leafnin, nurse and certified food addiction counselor, and welcome to Sippy Live, my weekly vlog on Facebook and YouTube and Instagram, where each week I take a different topic to discuss and give some food for thought and especially motivation for people who are living sugar-free or really want to limit their consumption of sugar and just in general take on healthy lifestyle, especially when it comes to eating real food. So today we are now coming up to the Jewish holiday of Purim. Purim, you could say it's kind of like the Jewish Halloween. There are kids, it's the tradition is to dress up in costumes. There is tons of junk food and candy given because it's a tradition to give these food baskets. And also, one of the very important themes of the Hebrew month of Adar, which is the month when Purim falls, is happiness. It is a tradition, and this is really a theme that is very important in Adar. This is the month of happiness. And not only is Adar the month of happiness, but it is actually something that is it's a mitzvah to be happy on Purim. So that's why there's a tradition to get drunk on Purim. Drink alcohol, you'll be happy, right? And this is one of the big traditions of Purim. People who I know who are like complete teetotalers all year will drink excessively on Purim as part of the mitzvah of being happy on Purim. So let's talk about this happiness that we're talking about. Let's talk about what makes us happy. And when we think about what makes us happy, it's important to differentiate between pleasure and happiness, or that sense of well-being. They are not the same, right? And unfortunately, in today's consumer society, the companies, in the name of profit, keep trying to sell us on that idea that if we experience more and more pleasure, the more the better, we will be happier. That will make us more and more happy. I think that in most areas, people are smart enough to understand that that's not necessarily true. For example, everybody knows that having a healthy relationship with a partner is great, and watching extreme pornography to excess on the internet is bad for you, and it won't make you happy, even though it is a form of extreme pleasure. Unfortunately, when it comes to food, they actually succeeded in convincing us about that. Everybody thinks, this is how I feel, like the society that we live in today and the culture, the food culture that we live in today dictates that if you don't eat these very pleasurable, hyper stimulating, hyper delicious, hyper addictive foods, then you are missing out on part of the enjoyment and happiness of life. It's not true. There are many, many people who, the more they eat of these foods, the more miserable they become. There is even, and this is where it's very important to understand, that not every food that gives extreme pleasure is necessarily going to make you happier. It might make you feel really great or feel better for a few minutes, but it's not going to give you happiness in life. That is not what makes life happy. And in today's food culture, it seems that is the belief. That is a leading belief. There is no celebration if there hasn't been some amazing cake. And it's even like, even the junk food today is different than the junk food that was around 20 years ago. It's much richer. There's much more the tastes and the different concoctions and mixtures are making all these foods, the pleasure that we're getting from these foods, more and more extreme. And it's actually causing us more and more harm. As a matter of fact, the psychologist Doug Lyle even wrote a book about that. He called the book The Pleasure Trap. What is the pleasure trap? The pleasure trap is basically up until about 100 years ago, maybe a little even less, like around before World War II, people on the most part ate real, natural food, and they experienced natural, balanced pleasure from the natural foods that they ate. Eating has been an enjoyable experience forever. That's what makes us survive. That's a survival mechanism, right? If we enjoy eating the food we eat, we are going to make an effort to get it. And our biology is wired for times of that there's never enough food around. So we want to be biologically wired to be motivated to enjoy the food, to look for the pleasure in our food. But in today's society and food culture, what's happened is 75% of our food supply is these hyper processed, hyper delicious foods. And then the pleasure that we experience from these foods is way above what nature intended. And you see, our brains, we love new things. But when something new that has given that like wow, right? Like that first time, there's even like there's a term for it. It's called the bliss point. That first time that you eat that new flavor of Ben and Jerry's ice cream and you take that first bite and it just like sends you to the moon. It's called the bliss point. But that bliss point doesn't happen again and again and again. The first time is always the best. But if you've decided like that's the most amazing ice cream that you've ever had and you have it again and you buy yourself like it's on sale, right? 2 for the price of 3, like 3 for the price of 2, and you buy 3 and then you eat it more and more and more. At some point, you're expecting that amazing wow that you had, but it doesn't really come. So what happens is our brain gets used to that hyper stimulation. In scientific terms, it's called down regulation. It's actually a way for the receptors that are getting that stimulation to defend themselves, really to protect themselves, because they can't handle all that stimulation all the time. And then what happens is that basically that hyper delicious food becomes the new normal. And then, if that's the new normal and that's what we're expecting from food, like think about, the kiddie meals, right? Kids here in Israel, they eat schnitzel and French fries with ketchup and a Coke, right? Or pizza or whatever it is. And that's the food that they're used to, that they eat. That's normal food for them. And then what happens is maybe somebody will gain weight, or maybe their blood sugar will go up, or something will happen and they'll decide that they're going on a diet. They have to lose weight, their blood sugar's up, they're going on a diet and they're only eating healthy food now. And what happens is that then the pleasure that people get from natural healthy food is not natural healthy pleasure. It's lower. It's like under pleasure, right? It's like it doesn't taste good. And then what happens is people are eating the exact right things that they should be, and it feels so wrong. The food is not tasty. It makes you irritable, and especially if you've gone on a diet and you're part of that diet mentality, then it's like what happens, you say after, okay, so maybe a week or 2 weeks or whatever time it is, you somehow manage to like hold on, but you're on this diet and you can't wait till this suffering will just finish, right? And in the meantime, poor me, I'm sitting around looking at all these people eat all these foods that I love, and I'm not allowed because I'm on a diet, and I just can't wait till this is over. But I hope that when it's over, I'll be able to do it with a little bit more, with more control, in moderation. And so we break, right? And then that's what happens. So it feels bad. You're eating exactly the right things and it feels exactly wrong. And you feel bad. And then the person breaks and goes back to that hyper stimulating food and hyper delicious food and never gets to that point, which does happen. If you don't break and you keep eating natural foods, what happens is that your brain and your taste buds recalibrate to have a normal, natural, pleasurable experience from normal, natural food. But it takes time. It takes a few weeks. And that's exactly my mentor Beaton Janssen calls it biochemical repair, right? The receptors in the brain, in the body, the receptors on your taste buds need to recalibrate to start enjoying again the natural pleasure from natural foods. So what I want to say to you is, and what's the difference between pleasure and happiness? Pleasure is something that we can get from outside stimulation, from substances or gambling or or porn or drugs or alcohol or nicotine or hyper processed sugary starchy foods. These things cause pleasure. What causes happiness are things that are more of an ethereal or spiritual experience, like when you stand on the beach and watch the sunset and feel at one with the universe. That is happiness. You can't get addicted to too many sunsets on the beach, but you can get addicted to these hyperstimulating substances or stimulations like, what they call right, like gambling or pornography. You get pleasure from them, but you can also actually get addicted to them because the extreme of pleasure is addiction. Pleasure is something that it's even processed in different parts of the brain with different chemicals. Dopamine is the neurochemical that is about pleasure. And serotonin, which is basically our own natural antidepressant that we have in our body, that is the neurochemical that is about happiness. So let's not get confused about what's making us happy and what's giving us pleasure. And maybe this is some food for thought for you in this month of happiness is, are you really actually getting the pleasure that you are expecting from certain substances, or are you abusing them? Are you just expecting or have some fantasy of pleasure that never actually comes out? And this is also in about something that I posted about this past week, about the fact that some people have realized that these hyper stimulating, hyper addictive foods do not give them pleasure. As a matter of fact, they found that when they give up on these addictive foods, these sugary, starchy, hyper processed foods, their lives, they feel a lot happier. They give up that fantasy of pleasure. This is exactly what happened to me. And this happens to the people that I coach who want to go sugar free, is that when you become willing to give up the fantasy of that pleasure, that high from food, what you get in return is happiness and a sense of well-being and health in your body and in your mind. That is the big prize. So this is not for everyone. There are some people who choose to stay with those pleasures, and there are some people who can consume these hyper processed foods in moderation. That's cool. But if someone has decided that they want to give up sugar and flour, then don't think that this means they're not happy or that they are sacrificing their happiness. It's for many, many people who will give up on the pleasure on that. And it's not even pleasure sometimes at some point. If when addiction develops, there is no pleasure anymore. It's just about survival. and somehow getting through the day and getting enough substance to get through the day. So when that, but to give up on the fantasy of that pleasure, on the idea of that pleasure, what we get in return is a happy life and this wonderful sense of well-being that you can't get too addicted to. So this is my message to you about the pleasure trap, about happiness versus pleasure. Don't fool yourself that happiness comes in a jug, in a carton of Ben and Jerry's. It does not. Happiness happens when you experience and love yourself in things that are not food related. That is my message to you. So thank you, Jennifer, for the wonderful comments and likes. Please like, share, and comment on this video, especially if you would like other people to see it, because that's what makes it get in front of more people who need to hear this message. If you would like to get the Sippy Live recording straight to your inbox each week, there is a link. If this is on Instagram, it's in my bio on the link tree, and on Facebook and YouTube, it is in the description. You can sign up and get this weekly live every single week straight to your inbox. Thank you so much for being here, whether it's here in live, and thank you, Jennifer, and whether it's on the recording. Have a wonderful day and a great evening. And of course, next week on Tuesday, it will be before Purim. We will talk about Purim. And anybody here who, this is a very important announcement, anyone here who is living sugar-free or is interested in living sugar-free, whether you're on a ketogenic diet or a low-carb diet, or you're in an abstinence-based food plan, or perhaps you just have decided to quit sugar and you celebrate Purim and you feel like you need some support before that holiday, which is so much junk food and candy like going around. There is a Purim support group that I am conducting on Sunday. It is going to be on Sunday evening, Israel time, 9 p.m., which is 2 p.m. EST. If you would like to join, please PM me. You can send me an email. My details are in my bios or wherever it is that you're watching this. PM me. And this is going to be a limited group. So if you are interested in it, sign up now. The cost is $10 per person. See you next week, Tuesday at 4:30 p.m. Israel time. Bye-bye.